Hello, MedTech Insights enthusiasts. This is Dr. Jennifer Joe with my co-host, the fabulous Dr. Bhatt. We are today streaming. We were today supposed to be streaming live at the Convergence Forum, and instead are in our regular places. Amaze at Mass General. I'm in my home streaming, but we are talking about the Convergence Forum. Today is a little bit unusual because we had the widespread electrical outages, which made it difficult for us to get on the Cape. When Dr. Bhatt isn't hosting the show, she's running the Massachusetts General Hospital telecardiology program, seeing congenital heart disease patients and teaching at the Harvard Medical School. She is also the president-elect of the American Heart Association. And when I'm not hosting the show, I see patients in the emergency room, urgent care, and hospitalist setting. We both support a number of traditional med tech and up-and-coming digital health startups. We both believe that healthcare can be better for the clinician and for the patient. We are live and also recorded, so you can watch us after the fact. We love and adore when people write in, especially people who are watching. So we love our audience. So please feel free to write in the chat. You can do that on LinkedIn. You can do that on YouTube and also on Facebook. And when you write, please let us know who you are, where you're watching from, and what you're interested in. And we will feature it at the bottom of the show. So we love that. And we also love questions for the guests that we have. We have really delightful guests, and we're going live right now. So over to you, Ami.
Absolutely. So I'm incredibly excited for today, the Convergence Forum. Let me tell you a little bit about it. So it's happening down on Cape Cod. We had a nor'easter here. We were out of power. Power is back this morning and everyone has arrived. We are streaming from here and then we'll go down there. So tomorrow morning stream will be live on site, but people will be calling in from there. So a little patience with us today. We'll have different speakers streaming in from the forum. The Convergence Forum's mission: bringing together high-level healthcare individuals to discuss and debate really the most pressing topics of interest in the industry. It's a really great way for people to create some really useful connections, relationship, and helps both big, but interestingly also really focusing on helping the smaller companies find their links and be able to grow. So today actually starts out with a little breakfast reception, which we're missing. But after that, the kind of topics we're discussing today, one will be talking about developing drugs at lower price points. And so that's going to be with Alexis Borsi and Anna Protopappas of Mersana Therapeutics. And then Kristen Fortney, who will hopefully be able to join us today, or if not today, then tomorrow, is the CEO and co-founder at BioAge. And she'll be talking about today's applications of AI in drug discovery. So really excited to be able to speak with her as well. Laurie Halleran is the president and CEO of the Halleran Consulting Group. She'll be coming on at 9 a.m. today, and quite a few other people that we'll be able to talk with. The idea behind these 2 days is really what is coming next. And what we're realizing about what's coming next is here already. So artificial intelligence is here, personalized genomics is here, digital health is here. And so we're extraordinarily excited to be speaking with these people. First guest today who will be streaming in with us is Mr. Theo Silvola. He is a board member and a CEO of BC Platforms since 2013. So BC Platforms is really one of the pioneers in bioinformatics, thinking about genome data management and data science. Their company has built a technology platform really to answer today's most groundbreaking research questions by using next generation sequencing and genome-wide association studies. So this platform technology really transforms genomic and clinical data then into scientific discoveries. They have managed to find ways to really partner with groups that are large, that are high powered, that have a lot of data, and are able to take data from those data lakes and make sense of it. And they've been doing this now really for over 7 years. So very, very exciting to be able to do that.
Very excited to have Pero and bring him in. So
do a little applause for Tara.
Yeah. Welcome, Taro.
So glad to have you with us. So let me just start by asking, because our audience has not had a chance to kind of meet you, although they've heard of BC platforms before. Will you tell us a little bit about, how as early as 2013 you were there on the front lines thinking about precision genomics in medicine, and pulling data together in a way that really has come about more recently to the practice of medicine? So kind of your course and how you got to this position.
Well, I mean, all in all, good morning, everyone. BC Platforms was actually started already 20 years ago. So it goes early days indeed. The company is actually a spin-off from MIT and Broad Institute. At that time, we started to focus on type 2 diabetes. And interestingly, the data that was used to really develop those insights and analytics, that data was driven from Scandinavian healthcare system. So basically from those EMR platforms located in Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. And eventually also the company was established in one of these Scandinavian countries, Helsinki, Finland. So it's been quite a few years that we've been focusing on this domain, and many things have changed during these past 20 years.
So thinking about change, if we start to think really just about the past 2 years, especially as COVID has changed what a lot of us do and how we connect, and kind of led to an idea of appreciation that personalized medicine is not something for the future, but it's really something that's relevant now, and that acceleration. Will you tell us a little bit about how you guys are able to be out there, or examples of who you are with, are working with, where you can pull together these genomics and clinical data?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, we do want to serve service providers, big healthcare institutions, when they do deploy their genomics-related workflows for everyday clinical practice. Once the platform is in place and the interpretation runs end to end, we actually do get access to all of the other clinical data as well. And eventually then we want to connect all these isolated data lakes across the globe into one service infrastructure. And this is timely because indeed, I mean, if you look at the COVID situation now, it doesn't follow the country borders, it doesn't follow the territories. So it is utmost important to make that data available for the research to speed up the overall R&D activities in the pharma.
Fantastic. So I think you do have a couple slides that you can perhaps share with our audience about what you're working on. I think this might be a good time for that.
Let me see.
And I see quite a few of our personalized genomics friends out here in our social media audience. So greetings to you. We have some friends from the Broad out there as well who are watching closely.
Jennifer, may I get a confirmation that you actually do see the slide?
We will see the slide soon. Yes. Do you want to do full screen? Excellent.
This works, I suppose. So I mean, once again, this is why the company does exist. We exist to revolutionize drug development and then also personalize the care. And the tagline that we use in our everyday communication is from data to health. Eventually, the company, this is a growth company indeed. We've been growing during the past 5 years more than 50% annually. And ultimately, we want to be the most valuable data and technology platform for precision medicine and personalized medicine. And we do that by integrating clinical and genomic data together. So, I mean, quite often, different type of platform companies, they keep these two segments separate. So, I mean, the pharma and the healthcare. And we see a very natural and fluent infinity loop between pharma and healthcare all in all. So whatever data we are able to accumulate on the healthcare side should be made available for the pharma. So this is a bit busy slide, complicated slide per se, but it tries to explain that unless you personalize really the solutions and drugs to the market, you actually have a risk of having also some ineffectiveness. Yeah. So what we try to bring on the table is to have access to all haplotypes across the globe, so that you really have data from each territory and region for drug discovery activities. So this is the intent. And eventually the way that we do it is by combining these two sectors, either with the software platform or then with the data science activities, making that data available.
Excellent. I think the concept of how we are developing drugs nowadays is a great point. We often talk about this in prior shows when we were talking about randomized controlled trials, right? And how we take a very heterogeneous population and then we try and make a conclusion based on it. And I think the idea behind drug discovery and the relevance to populations is the same. We know so much detail now about particular individuals, not only the risk that we could propose they have in the future, but their responses to different types of medications or classes of medications. And we know that this is actually kind of incredibly important in different ethnicities, different races. There are different responses. And so the trials that we're doing oftentimes are really not relevant for everybody. And you can say, well, we can't do drug discovery in just one group, but we're saying, no, do it in everyone. Just let us give you more particular data. And I think this is why BC Platforms is really so exciting to us. So what I'd love to do is continue this conversation. Thero, you stay with us, but Kristen Fortney is also here with us. Let me tell you a little bit about her and then we can bring her on. So Kristen is the co-founder and CEO of BioAge. So that's a clinical stage biotech company, and it's developing a pipeline of treatments to extend healthy lifespan by targeting the molecular causes of aging. Kristen's scientific background is in aging biology and machine learning. She received her PhD in medical biophysics from the University of Toronto, then did her postdoctoral training at Stanford. I think it's perfect time to bring her on because as we're thinking about how we deliver a new pipeline of treatments, how drug discovery needs things to be personalized such that we can actually do better. At the same time, there's the concept of health, right? So not just drug discovery, but drug discovery to extend the lifespan. And I think that's incredibly important in thinking about aging. So let's bring on Kristen Fortney, CEO of BioAge. Hi, Kristen.
Welcome,
Hey, good
Kristen.
morning.
Welcome.
Good morning, guys.
Great to have you with us. Are you down there on the Cape already?
I am in one of their
Wonderful.
spare rooms here because all the bedrooms here still have no power. So it's an adventure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being there with us. It looks like you have heat in this room and you have wine. So, that's a pretty good combination. Excellent. Kristen, what we'd love to do for the audience is, we know your training, phenomenal to have kind of the combination of training in aging biology and machine learning. I think this is the right time for those two things to come together. But will you just tell us a little bit about how you decided to start the company? How did you go from that training to I'm going to be a CEO? We have a lot of young entrepreneurs in the audience and kind of budding entrepreneurs who are looking at the two of you and saying, wow, how do they have these massive platforms? So
yeah, sure. Happy to tell you a bit about the story. So I've always focused on aging research for my PhD and also my postdoc. Just because I'm really excited about the possibility of the new discoveries here to really improve how we age and health at a population level. And there weren't a lot of companies translating it yet, right? So BioAge now is really one of the first companies in the clinic actually testing clinical hypotheses around aging mechanisms. And while I was a PhD student and then a postdoc, I also always focused on human aging because to my mind, this is the low-hanging fruit of the aging field. Like there already are humans who live to be over 100, and their brains still work and their bodies still work. And what's different about their underlying biology that we can learn from, that we can then mimic with a drug? And so the idea behind BioAge was really to learn from these human experiments walking around us. So we're built on some really special biobank relationships. We have a few biobank partners that started collecting samples from healthy middle-aged people as long as 50 years ago. So they have blood samples that have been stored for over, decades. Then additional samples were collected longitudinally. And there's really detailed electronic health records that track the entire future history of these people, including how long they live, what diseases they get when they're older, and even health span variables, like what's their walking speed at subsequent exams, what's their grip strength. And what we do is we go into those samples and we use modern technologies to enumerate all the molecules and then ask what's changing with aging and also what predicts the future and what's really different about the biology of these older people. It was really exciting to transition from a postdoc directly to starting a company.
Amazing.
that's, for me, like being in Silicon Valley, being, in that area, I was definitely a key part of it. Like it would have been harder to start that, I think, coming from just in Toronto. But when you move to the Bay Area, you meet other people who are founders, and you realize that's a possibility as well. And in my case, like if there'd been a bunch of great aging companies already, I might have joined up. But there was really no one doing this yet. And so and it took me longer than most maybe to realize that didn't happen in academia, the drug discovery and development. And that you have to sort of go, I mean, there are rare exceptions, like George Church is one of them. But really to sort of actually translate these discoveries, you had to go out and start something.
Wonderful. It's funny you mentioned George Church. We were just meeting with a couple of young people who have kind of grown out of his tutelage and are now starting their own companies as well. And it's true. It's great to have mentors like the two of you and others to be able to talk to our audience as well, and the younger people in the audience. So let's take a step back, though, and I'd like to ask this question to both of you. You are doing a combination of looking at kind of either molecular targets or genomics, respectively, but then you are combining that with clinical data. The volume of clinical data. So as a clinician, I'm looking at you and saying, the volume of clinical data in my EMR, how are you finding those insights? Are you feeding into that? As a clinician, I always think, oh, more supervised machine learning, right? I'm always thinking, let me tell you what I'm looking for. And it sounds to me like you are doing kind of some combination, either unsupervised or like, what is the data out there? What are the trends that we're seeing? And some of them may clinically make sense to someone like me, and others may not, but they may just be very, very strong signals. Will you talk to us a little bit about that AI concept for both of you and algorithms? How do you pull from such vast data lakes and actually make meaning of it?
And very excited to have our audience members joining. David Fisher, founder of Cirrus Life and Health, is watching from Milan, Italy. So thanks for joining and watching. And please tell us where you're watching from. We have Dagmar, who's watching from San Juan, Puerto Rico. So we'd love to have our audience participate. Sorry, and moving into the answer to the question.
Happy to comment on how we do that at BioAge. And really, it's a combination of supervised and unsupervised learning. And for us, the supervised component is, which molecular changes when you're middle-aged predict longevity. So predict all-cause mortality, predict future brain health, predict future physical health, because we have all these variables for how people are doing in the future. And at the same time, the unsupervised component is really around like these individual proteins or metabolites or transcripts, how are they behaving together in networks, and how are they correlated throughout time in our data sets? And it's really integrating these two together that helps us narrow down on a particular pathway and its relation to health span.
Fantastic. Thero, from your concept?
Well, I mean, our profile as a company is to act like a safe broker between the data providers and different data related use cases. So basically, our perspective to the whole workflow is such that we try to make some common sense out of so many different types of EMR systems and platforms. We always spend lots of time with the data harmonization related issues. Data privacy is a big thing. And then for different purposes, data has to be made available with a different type of means. Sometimes you can do a so-called data copy, and sometimes we have to work in a federated environment, depending of the complexity of the information and local legislation in different countries. So when it comes to the AI development, first we do need to understand that how that data can be made accessible for algorithm developers. And it's a completely different mechanism to build these new innovations and algorithms once we get to copy the information, or whether we have to, in a way, operate in an infrastructure where the data still stays behind the customer firewalls or data partner firewalls. And even for those use cases, our system and our platform has to enable the technical, tools and functionalities. So that's in a way our perspective. Our job is really to work on the infrastructure side.
Excellent. And those are things that, of course, as a daily clinician, I sometimes don't think of, right? It's just, how are you going to access that data? What does that country say about your ability to do that? Excellent. Kristen, we have a couple of questions coming in about thinking about BioAge and whether that is for companies to start doing drug development, or whether that's available for individuals to start thinking about themselves and what their molecular makeup is, and if there's anything they can do to change their future health or lifespan. So is there any kind of B2C concept for you guys, and what are you thinking?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. For our particular data sets, the answer is usually no, unless it's so we're not going to do any B2C ourselves. That might be something that we do in collaboration with the right company, but really we want to be laser focused on the drug development aspect of it. So our whole process is, from our data, we identify an important pathway, and then we bring in a molecule, that actually targets that pathway and advance it to clinical programs. So for us, this is more around supporting our clinical programs. That said, and this probably relates to the question, I also think that these are the right data sets to build biomarkers of aging, right? So that's something that we're very interested in as well. And again, for us, it usually comes into our actual clinical use, because just to give you an example, like when we bring in a drug, and we've in-licensed drugs now from Amgen, from Shionogi, from Taisho, that are clinical stage, we're bringing in a drug where we think the mechanism ultimately is relevant to a very broad aging disease indication. But we're always going first to an acute severe disease where we can get a rapid clinical proof of concept in humans. And I think this is really important because we are developing a platform and we want to make lots of clinical bets over time. So what that means, though, is that, after 3 months of treatment, we're going to get a readout, a primary endpoint relevant to just one acute severe disease. And at the same time, we would love to learn if the drug is actually affecting more general aging processes at the same time. And that's where biomarkers come in. So we are, on our clinical subjects, doing full proteomes, and they all have wearables on. And we are interested in connecting those back to the biomarkers that we derive from the platform. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right. So my knowledge of aging is somewhat limited, other than personal experience, but I find there's two biomarkers that I know of, right? So one is telomere shortening that I've kind of learned about over time, right? And then the second one is the graying of my hair. And so I feel like those are the two things that I can follow. But this is incredibly exciting. Jen, any other questions from your audience there? Otherwise, I've got a couple here.
None currently.
Okay.
I was really interested in wondering what kind of wearables that you're tracking with this and adding to the proteomic data.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, it's really like it's a clinical wearable that really only measures the walking speed. I had thought that, we could get Fitbits or Apple Health for everybody and have this sort of wider array of variables. But in a lot of cases, we are going into much older populations. And so there are other considerations around, how easy it is to use, how often you have to charge it. So we're going with these sort of more validated clinical wearables that have a reduced scope of what they're measuring. That said, I think the motion is one of the most interesting ones to capture. Yeah.
Excellent. So we have a couple questions coming in for both of you in terms of fundraising. So there's quite a few entrepreneurs out there who are looking at the two of you and thinking about, how you have gone about convincing people to help you do things that are not going to necessarily have any obvious short term, but really aiming more for long-term drug development, right? And so what you guys have done in terms of your pitches to be able to be this successful, because both of you have done a really great job in being able to get support for really changing this concept of drug development. And maybe, Tara, you want to go first, and then Kristen?
I can start. If I go back in time a few years when we actually did our round A, at that year, I think I met like 140 investors, so quite a bit across the globe. So it is a full-time exercise when you start doing it. So the first message what I would maybe think of is that you need to be thoughtful and careful. Who do you actually select? There's lots of money available and funding available, but it is going to be a partner for a long time. So trying to find an investor who actually do have an industry and domain understanding benefits a lot. You may understand that when you pitch with genomics and omics platform and so on, quite a few investors actually after your pitch will ask that would you please, Mr. Silvola, again explain what the word genome means. So it's important that they understand the domain, understand the business, and then can even build access for you. So this is a slow-moving industry. It has lots of legacy requirements and complexities. So sharing that same vision is utmost important, and sharing also the values. So understanding the people behind those investment vehicles and VCs and so on is equally so. So in the end, you are not working with that fund or specific investor institute, but those individuals matter as well.
Excellent, excellent. And I think, Jennifer, if I'm right, we have Richard Kivel from Graybella Capital, who is one of Thero's partners, coming on a little bit later. So that'll be great. Kristen, from your perspective, how did you get people to buy into this?
Yeah, so just to agree with Tero there, you have to talk to a lot of people, you do. But if you're coming from academia, like, this is fundamentally different, and in a good way, in a sense, right? Like, if you're writing a grant and it's supposed to be for something risky in scientific research, the joke is always, and it's true, that you should have already done the work when you're applying for the grant. It should be de-risked to that extent. And when you submit your grant to, say, the NIH, you need a whole committee of people to think that, like, it's not unreasonable, right? It's more sort of a committee type decision. Mm-hmm. And when you're going out to raise, your seed funding for your company, these are sort of, there's individual angels, there's individual VCs. They all have very different convictions about what the future looks like, different expertise. And you really need to find sort of one true believer, and it's a very different model. And I would say they are more willing to fund riskier things where the payoff is potentially huge, right? But you might have to wait for it. And that's sort of the scenario for most biotechs, because you don't really see revenue until you're selling drugs.
And on the other side of the same story, most drug companies have really, their own development pipelines kind of built out, right? Their own concepts. So how does somebody like either one of the two of you get into those companies and say, hey, look, we can help you do this better? How does that entry happen? Because it really, these are large companies that have entire arms that are doing their work, and that they have their concepts on how they're going to find the next drug, the next molecule. And so maybe a little bit about how you did that side of things. Sorry, I'm really working you guys today with the how you did it, but I'm seeing the number of young entrepreneurs that are watching us right now. And so I feel like I've got to do this for them.
Well, if I go first, indeed, more than 60% of our operations, they are linked to the big pharma. So those big 20 companies that basically dominate the life science sector as we speak. So the entry point for us is usually from the clinical phase of the development, because that's where also the combination of genetic information and clinical data together, they bring the highest value. In addition, of course, the early phase of the development, like in the target identification activities, that's typically another entry point for us. But usually we address our storyline to the therapeutic area heads who have a business responsibility as well as a lot of science responsibilities. But identifying that sweet spot and entry point, so to say, indeed is a big thing. The lead time to sales usually is somewhere between 6 to 12 months, or even longer. So if you hit the wrong button, you can easily extend the sales lead time more than 6 months or 12 months.
A great point. Kristen, thoughts?
Yeah, so our focus at BioAge is really, advancing our own drugs, doing our own clinical development, and really in our interactions with pharma, we are buyers. We are buyers of assets, buyers of drugs that have already reached a certain developmental stage. And just to give you a concrete example, so in April of this year, we brought in a drug from Amgen that had already been through phase 1 studies. It's an agonist of the apelin receptor. They were developing it originally for heart failure, but discontinued it in phase 1 for strategic reasons. And we reached out to them. We said, hey, our human data sets tell us that this is going to improve muscle function. And we'd love to look at it in some of our experiments. And then under an MTA, they gave us a bunch of the molecule. We put it into a bunch of old mouse models of muscle aging, saw some amazing results, and then decided to in-license the drug. So our interactions with large pharma are really around, hey, our data tells us this spectrum of valuable indications where this drug can work that you weren't aware of, that are off strategy for your company. So let's work together.
Fantastic, fantastic. So now that we talked about how to get out there, how to tell your story, one of those large parts are who are the people that can help you do that. And so maybe with that in mind, we will bring on Laurie Halleran next. We are honored to have her with us. Laurie Halleran is the head of Halleran Consulting Group. Her story is a great one. Look forward to sharing it with you.
She's not quite ready. I am.
Oh,
sorry.
she's not quite ready. I'm so
we
sorry.
We have a nice question from the audience. So, David Fisher, who's watching from Italy, is asking who is the customer, which you just answered, and who is the user. I think we answered that. And where do you see that being this year versus 3 years from now?
Great question.
Who wants to go first? Yeah, I can go first. I mean, we do have a big vision. Ultimately, of course, we dream and work very hard to become the platform for integrated omics data altogether. So we have the privilege to work at the moment on 3 continents. We have lots of data accumulating in Asian countries, especially the Southeast Asia region is a big domain for us and big region for us. Europe is quite complex because of the GDPR, and they set a lot of also country-specific regulations. So having that European heritage gives us a certain advantage. And then your US data obviously is a big part of our activities. So all in all, in 3 years, I hope that we've been able to participate so many drug development programs across the industry, and our data would be sufficient and well structured for this purpose.
And Kristen?
Yeah, and I was just reading, and I think the question was around wearables, and I think that that's really, it's been really exciting to see the advances there over the last few years, and I know that they're in widespread consumer use, and I they're making this transition now to sort of clinical utility, which I think is really exciting, especially for aging indications. Like for example, there are our muscle drugs could ultimately be like a drug for frailty, right? But like the regulatory path is not clear. What is the endpoint there? Is it something like a 6-minute walk, which is done once and which is incredibly noisy? I think that ultimately these wearables might provide better clinical measures of whether function is improving, which could be really important, especially in the aging space, but certainly in many others as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. So another question that comes up often when we talk about this is, it's a lot about the data that's kind of going in. And here in the United States, we've been very focused on thinking about race, ethnicity, social determinants of health, and making sure that we are creating drugs that are really relevant for all the population. Now, I think Daryl already started by talking a little bit about the importance of doing this globally and therefore really including everybody. And happy to hear more about that. But Kristen, from your perspective too, are you noticing, is there data that we feed in when we're doing molecular studies that are kind of more typically in certain races than others, where you have to make sure that you're able to really be equitable about how you're doing drug development?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, it's funny, right? Because we're taking this human first approach to drug discovery for aging, and so already we're better than starting in black 6 mice. But yes, then there's all this human diversity, right? And
Okay.
That's great.
That's good. We're
levels of
mouse genome
and our focus first, I would say, is really trying to find some, I think there are universal ways in which humans age. So for example, right, we have a human cohort with Japanese ancestry. We have one with Estonian ancestry. And so we are sort of looking for common signals that are true across different cohorts. Of course, there are a lot of differences, but we think that some of the similarities might be the best ones to target first.
And when we think about, just going back to this concept of stressors, right? And some of these countries, which have been, war-torn countries for decades. I have friends who've grown up in Lebanon, and just there are so many places where that stress, we see it here in inner cities in the United States, here in Boston. The few markers that I do know about, gray hair aside, in aging, you see more telomere shortening, in the Black population in the United States, regardless of the fact that slavery was gone so long ago, right? Do you see any of these markers being different based on what the environment has been like in those countries or those areas? Are you seeing those differences too, of just the stress of life and that differential?
Yeah, definitely. You also see differences in terms of the major causes of death, or the major comorbidities as a function of age, depending on the environment. And that's one reason why I think it's so important to not only look at genetics, but also these dynamic omics modalities like the metabolome and the proteome, which are integrating both, right? They're going to reflect your genetics, but they're also going to reflect the stress of your environment, your diet, all these other variables. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. So Scott Kirshner, I think, is with us. So maybe we'll have Scott pop in. Scott is the brains behind Convergence Forum with that whole team, and it would be great to say a quick hello. I know he has a lot to do out there actually on the campus. So Jen, do you want to just bring him in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Scott, how are
Scott?
you? Thank you for being with us. Jen, can you take Scott off mute? Oh, there we go.
I had myself on mute because Laurie and I are actually in the same room, and I was like, "There's probably going to be feedback. We're like on opposite sides of the same space." That's, it gets challenging when you're in physical spaces nowadays that are not your house.
It is so true. There's a reason that we streamed from out here before we're coming down to you, and hopefully that's a valid one. Scott, thank you, first of all, for introducing us to all these wonderful people, introducing our audience to this really carefully hand-selected group of forward thinkers who are innovating at the edge of healthcare and bringing it forward. Would you let our audience know a little bit about Convergence Forum? I gave them a brief intro, but what our goal is and what you love about it, maybe.
Well, ordinarily it's a beautiful fall weekend here on the Cape, and this year it's like post nor'easter cleanup weekend on the Cape, so it's going to be interesting. Kristen is in the right place. I think she's over in like the wine cellar, where I'm sure a lot of people are going to hang out over the next day or two. We started it, I'm not sure how many years ago. I think 2003 might have been the first year for it, 2004. It's always been on Cape Cod, which is just a nice place to come to kind of get out of the, Kendall Square, Cambridge ecosystem and sort of give people a chance to like take a breath and, maybe meet some new people and think some new thoughts. But the premise of it always was about the fact that, medical device and pharma and biotech and digital healthcare, had been thought of as separate industries, and that there just was going to be a lot more interaction and convergence among those things. It was definitely before we had seen, the concept of FDA approved digital therapeutics. That wasn't a thing when we started the event. You were just starting to see some of the first implantable devices be approved back then. The idea of diagnostics and drug combinations was starting to emerge. And so we just wanted to look at the intersections of all those fields, and initially really starting with people who worked in the Boston and Cambridge ecosystem. And it really has since expanded, down into New York, New Jersey, the West Coast, as the ecosystem in Boston has kind of grown and, into the hub that it is now.
That's fantastic. So Scott, I know that you can't spend too much time with us, but I'm going to ask you the question that I think we all wanted to. What do you see as the future? You have picked proteomics to be here. You've picked AI and data and healthcare. You've picked these two wonderful speakers. But what things are you excited about? If you had to pick two or three things and say, this is it, this is what's going to change things next. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
The one thing which I sort of say jokingly, but I don't think it will turn out to be a joke, is drive-through medicine. I don't know how much you've talked about this on the show, but like we all had the experience during COVID, right? Of, having, testing where you didn't need to get out of your car as an experience, right? And like, well, when I had that done once, a year ago, I started thinking like, well, how many other processes and procedures could you do without needing me to get out of my car and go into the hospital and spend half a day, waiting on appointments. So I think just that lowering the bar, Minute Clinic has obviously been part of it. I just think that, lowering the bar and friction of actually getting healthcare is going to be super important. And I do think the technology that we have at home, I know this has been a big interest in your show, right? There is telemedicine now, but there aren't really telemedicine devices that are used in a widespread way, where the telemedicine provider could have a dashboard and really see, what's going on with this patient other than what they're telling me. So I think those are two things that we definitely see happening. We're touching on them a little bit in the conference, but we're also planning the May 2022 edition of Convergence. And so those are some of the things that I think we'll build sessions around.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's fabulous. So I have to say that resonates. We have been talking all this week. The Applied Health Innovation Consortium with the American College of Cardiology was yesterday. And one of the topics was, can we start to do digital prescriptions? We really need to be able to prescribe what our patients should be using, what they should not, right? And then how that data is coming in and what those data lakes look like and how we're going to pull that information, use some algorithms and AI and give something actionable to the providers to then do for them. But that can all happen from the comfort of people's homes. Then you think about people who are at risk who can't actually connect from home. There are many people like that. And for them, federally qualified health centers are places where we now have Wi-Fi and we have internet. And so it's a different version of that, drive-through concept, but it's drive-through to really decrease that digital divide that exists and perhaps even deliver more equitable healthcare in the future. So I feel like you've got your pulse you got your finger on the pulse of where the future probably lies.
Yeah, and in a way, I'll turn things over to Laurie, who's the more interesting person on the other end of the room here with me. We're not in the wine cellar, I should point out. There's no wine evident in our room. But the other thing I would say is like there's so much capital pouring into therapeutics and now into vaccines, right? Like therapeutics has it figured out, right? Like understand the pathway, the stuff that we're talking about, right? Like these digital connections between, just incentivizing the rest of the healthcare system to share data and interoperate and go to where the consumer is, more stuff happening on this device. Like there's so much work and so many barriers that need to get knocked down that I think there's going to be a lot of action there over the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, thank you for being with us. And if you need to pop off, we completely understand. You have a lot to manage there. We'll see you in person in about an hour.
All right.
Let us bring on Laurie next. Let me tell you a little bit about Laurie Halleran. Taro and Kristen, for you as well, happy to have you stay with us. But if you do need to get pulled away or get ready for your talks, which you're giving, completely understand that as well. And really, really grateful for you guys to be here and spend time with us.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you, Amy.
Kristen. Take care. So this is great because we will spend the next kind of 15 minutes before we close up thinking about those people who have helped companies actually make it. And this is going to be extremely exciting. So Laurie Halleran founded the Halleran Consulting Group in 1998. Her time as a pediatric ICU nurse was actually what inspired her to start a company that helped move new therapies through the FDA processes, get them into the hands of the patients that desperately needed it, and do that better and faster. So she provides a strategic development team so that innovative startup companies can have access to world-class expertise, but they do it at a fraction of the cost. Since its humble beginnings, Halleran has grown into a leading consultancy of really like-minded experts who are dedicated to improving human health and life science. I will say about Laurie herself, she has been a mentor to so many. The Boston Business Journal has named her a woman of influence. She is one of the 100 most inspiring people in life science by Pharma Voice. And she is the one who brought us to the MedExec Women Conference. We had our second conference just earlier this week. And to all of you out there, medexecwomen.org, please take a look at it. but it's an organization really focused on empowering female executives to accelerate the positive impact of medical devices, diagnostic drug delivery, and now digital healthcare. So she's done a great job of bringing people together, elevating women in the field, and we're really all grateful for the work that she does and for the extra time she takes with all of us. So with that, let us bring on Laurie Halleran.
Welcome, Laurie.
Welcome.
Not
So great to
hearing
have
you,
you with us.
Unfortunately.
Oh, you're not hearing us. Okay.
No, I can't hear you. I'm really sorry.
No, that is all right. Troubleshooting
I don't know what to do.
concepts.
I can't hear you, Amy.
Okay, hold on. I'm gonna. Effects of a Norrie stroke. This is what happens. We're gonna have her log out and log back in again. While we're doing that, I see quite a few people in the audience also who are from some private equity and VC. And I will tell you that I think one thing that has come up again and again by people who are on the show and those who watch has been how grateful this community is, our digital health, medtech, biotech community, for investors who really believe in the fact that we can change how we deliver healthcare. Investing, I think 20 years ago, felt a little bit different than investing today, in that our investors have really become partners in people who see what the path is like, but also are able to help influence the path. And Laurie's a great example of that. So I really do hope when she relogs in, she'll be able to hear us. And otherwise, I may just type my questions to her and have her talk because she really is amazing. But I think the fact that a lot of the people who are investing with us become our partners makes an incredible difference in our ability to really move things forward and move things fast. As many of our CEOs have said, it is a hard thing to do. Dr. Joe, you have done it. But the investor as partner really does make it a course that's much more enjoyable and at times tolerable, which I think is really important. Do we see Laurie coming back in? Are we having luck with
I completely agree. We don't. Yeah, this has been special, this whole widespread electrical outage. I don't see Laurie yet. Really inspired by everyone who has come on, who's spoken today. Very excited about all of the data and getting data in a meaningful way and clean data. I think that's we have an EHR that captures data, but really knowing the patient, what's happening with the patient and what's happening over time with the patient, or I should say when we follow them out in the community or people. So excited that this field of precision medicine is really advancing. It's going to be interesting to see which is why it's called the Convergence Forum, right?
Correct. Right. Yep. It's so important, breaking down silos and bringing people together. And, so this forum is doing it by bringing together people who do digital health, who do kind of MedTech, who do biotech, life sciences. Earlier this week, the MedExec Women Conference, that was one that brought together silos of women. So we had lawyers in the room. We had kind of large companies like Boston Scientific and Johnson & Johnson. We had clinical leaders in the room, those of us who come from large academic hospitals. And then we had venture cap in the room. And so it was really great to break down a different set of silos, right? And bring those people together. And then yesterday, is she coming? Do we see her?
So we do, Laurie is just about ready. And we do have one really great question from Dr. Saber from Durham, North Carolina. I miss the research triangle. I see the area of precision oncology is already making a huge progress in companies like Tempus and Caris. I think that's where we talk about a lot of the genomics, genetics data making impact. But what are the specialties in medicine? So I think this is a question for us.
No, it's
what are the specialties in medicine that we think will depend primarily on personalized medicine for treating patients? I guess, where do we see that going?
Yeah. I'm happy to go first if you want, or you can go first.
You can go first.
Okay. So I think I have two separate answers, right? One is I can target for you a few things. So I think cardiology, bias, right, is ripe for personalized medicine. I think it's incredibly important because everybody has a somewhat different path towards developing their cardiovascular disease, but most people are headed for it. However, what I will say is I think the concept of personalized medicine is more the idea that for each individual, there is a combination of nature and environment that is constantly changing and affecting us as we age. And so I actually think there's probably not a field in which personalized medicine is not relevant. And so you may see it start in oncology and in cardiology and probably some of the inflammatory diseases, whether that's inflammatory GI, inflammatory rheumatoid arthritis, et cetera. But I will say that I think it's probably relevant to just about kind of everybody's health. And as we move further back towards preventative medicine, I think that's where making predictions based on personalized data is really going to be the future of medicine. That's for everybody.
Oh, that's a beautiful answer. I feel a little unprepared to go next.
But Laurie's also ready, so that's good.
But I also agree with you. Like, it's going to apply, I think, to the entire field of medicine. I'm most excited in terms of just general internal medicine. Maybe I say that because I'm more of a generalist. Internal medicine and making changes in hypertension medicines, like being able to know like what hypertension medicine's the right one for the patient. Here's an example of where we can have good impact from data, precision medicine, and targeting. And I say this a lot. Right now, if someone has depression, we know that it's going to take an average of trying 3 to 6 different medications before one will work. And what we do is we titrate you up, get you on it and see if it has an effect, and then titrate you off of it, and then titrate up another drug. That takes like 6 weeks just to do the up titration, see if it works, and down titration. That takes like 2 years for a patient to go through these medicines before we can find one that works. That's insane. If we could just speed that up a little bit, and I can know ahead of time, especially for something like depression, if a medicine will work. So that's where I'm most excited. And I think oncology is just got a lot going on because CRISPR, we have so much biotech that's having great influence in the cell and gene therapies and being able to cure cancers for the first time. And so I think that's essentially because there's just so much going on, so much possibilities. And we've already had a proven track record of curing not proven. It's definitely not proven yet, but excited about it, of curing cancer in this one area. That's why I think precision medicine is going there first. So I think Laurie is ready,
Laurie is ready,
and
yes.
we're excited to have you introduce her.
Absolutely. So Laurie Halleran.
Oh, sorry.
And I did the bio already. Yeah. Let's just bring her out. One more thing. Let's bring her, because she's got to go live soon too on stage. All right, Laurie, is that better? You can hear us?
I can hear you, and hopefully you can hear me.
Fantastic. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. So thank you for being here with us. And perhaps if you did not hear your intro before, we told them about your pediatric ICU experience. We told them about really bringing a lot of these companies to market. But we also bragged a little bit about MedExec Women and how great you have been as a mentor and bringing us all together and breaking down silos. So thank you for all of that.
Well, Jennifer, you in the last 2 sentences you said, you talked about all these new oncology treatments and how they are going to change the whole landscape. But what a lot of physicians and many scientists don't realize is it's never going to get to a patient until it gets vetted and approved for use by FDA and other regulatory agencies. And that's exactly the reason I started the company. I saw people mess things up and spend hundreds of millions of dollars and knew that they would never be able to they wouldn't get the team with the seasoning and the experience, the relevant experience, to be able to get something developed the most efficient way. And we kind of fit ourselves right into a little niche that existed. And it was clearly a good place to be.
That's phenomenal. So when we think about, maybe will you tell people just a little about 1998, I believe, right, is when you first started. And you have done so much since then in your course of kind of the past, decade to two of doing this. What have you seen change about the ability to get these things through the FDA to market. How has that environment changed over time? I know it's a big question, but just the highlights that you think people should know, because it's an area we don't talk about enough.
It's gotten a lot more complicated, much more complicated, because the therapies and the modalities are so much more complicated. It's not only the regulatory pathway, it's the manufacturing, it's the lack of patience, it's the complexity of just conducting a clinical trial, so that people who haven't been doing it for years, haven't been formulating regulatory strategies for years, they're a little bit out of their comfort zone, or a lot out of their comfort zone, and it's too expensive to make mistakes. So you really have to do it right the first time. There's just too much that can go wrong. So that's really the biggest thing that I've seen change.
It's amazing. And as we look, because we've talked a lot about digital health on this show, and we look at digital health now, needing to be regulated. Many of those companies are coming out of engineers and clinicians, right, who have come together to do this with really, and I'll admit, very little regulatory training. It's not something in my 20 years of education that somebody kind of talked about.
Very little.
Okay, none. None. Absolutely zero.
They squeezed it in between like anatomy and histology. Okay.
But go ahead, Laurie. Yeah, thoughts about that industry.
Here's the thing: the classes are one thing, but they're the basics. The real way that people learn is by doing, and sometimes by making mistakes. It's a really hard industry to get into. Most people that I know, especially at our stage of careers, they fall into it. They didn't intend to do it. They just find it, and they decide it's a really good way to make a bigger difference. But there isn't a lot of there are very few educational programs, and that's a big passion of mine. That's one of the reasons I'm here. It's one of the reasons I did the MedExec Women thing, because we're all here to help each other, and to mentor each other, and to guide each other, and to be there. And that's not going to change, I don't think. I think that's going to be the way it is.
That's wonderful. We have quite a few kind of women leaders who comment that they couldn't make it to, or they had not heard before of MedExec. I'm glad they have now. But a lot of questions about being a woman and being able to get to not only the point where you're a CEO, but you're this well respected. And I'm going to summarize because there's so many questions coming in. But essentially, it seems hard. How do you do it? Any advice for us is kind of what I'm seeing.
The biggest thing so I didn't really think about running a company of 150 FTEs when I started it. The biggest thing that I would say is I had the guts to just jump in there and do it. And I also had the self-awareness that I don't know everything, and I shouldn't know everything. I should surround myself with people who are good at the things I'm not, and then empower them to do the things that they're good at. So my executive team is 5 women, and we work really well together. We're really transparent. I'm not there to do the finances. I don't do well with that. So that's the biggest thing I would say. And the second biggest thing I would say is you cannot underestimate the importance of creating a really good culture.
Yes.
Because it's got to be top of mind. There's so many bad places to work that if you want the talent and you want them to stick around, you have to make it a really good place to work.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think that is probably what has made this week for me so amazing, between MedExec Women and the Applied Health Innovation Consortium and now Convergence Forum, is the culture that these organizations bring, and then the culture that the people who come to these bring with them, right, from their companies. And it really makes it a fun way to advance the growth. So I know that we are kind of at time. Do you have time for 1 or 2 more questions, Laurie? Is that okay?
Yeah, I do. I'll just be late for my management meeting.
So one of the things that people really talk about is kind of pre-funded startups, right? And their challenges. But then there's also really big global life science companies, and they have some product development challenges. And they're 2 different kind of arenas. Are the strategies that you bring to those 2 similar? Are there differences? And for people who are right now just kind of grappling in those two areas, again, kind of pre-funded startups who just need some organizational growth strategy, and then huge life sciences companies who have sections that have product development challenges. Advice for them, thoughts?
This is an hour conversation.
I know, I'm so sorry.
So the pre-funded startups, often the things that's going to get you funding is having a really crisp plan. I've seen so many pitch decks that have lots of photos of slides and cells, and that's not what's going to get you the money. It's having a really good laid out plan where you've prioritized what you want to develop first, and you know or have gotten guidance on how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. Because that's what investors want. They want to know that they're investing in a company that has the ability to use the money wisely. So that's the biggest thing in a pre-funded startup. In a big company, it's really interesting because big pharma, this might not be popular to say, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Now we're all.
That's why we have you here. This is it.
Now we're like,
in big pharma is don't expose yourself by taking any untoward risks.
Yeah, that's true.
So the biggest enemy they have is themselves. Unless there's a really strong leader that comes in and says, we're going to turn this on its head, everybody wants to stick to the status quo. And they waste enormous amounts of time and money, and they kind of tamp down the culture by never encouraging risks. So, we're seeing a few companies come and say, we need to revolutionize how we're doing things. We need to bring in technology into our clinical development. The technology's been around for over 20 years, but it's rarely used because people don't know where to start.
Yep.
So that's been one of the biggest things that I'm hopeful the pandemic will change. And we jumped in both feet to try to help companies adopt it, because it's a really, really big field that it's different than digital health. Adopting the technology that will really create the efficiency in every part of the clinical development pathway is really what we have to do. We have to get on that, because that's really where we should go.
That is phenomenal. I will say what you just said, Laurie, is applicable to so many different versions of healthcare, right? Whether it's public health provision and doing population health in the way we've always done it, or whether it's an academic medical center or a large hospital system. There's a lot of, this is our workflow. If we get too far off from this, blank may happen. And yes, quality and safety for patients comes first, but a lot of times it's, what will the patient experience be like? And I think our patients are ready to be partners too. They're ready to be partners to get drugs out there faster. They're ready to be partners to get healthcare in a different way. And they know that there may be small missteps, but as long as it's not affecting quality or safety, I think rethinking makes sense, especially in large organizations that maybe haven't been agile but want to.
It's kind of what's best for the patient. What's really high, what's taking the high road in your ethics. Yeah. If you do that, you're probably not going to make too many mistakes. If you're always the patient's top of mind. And that's the other thing that I'm seeing, is that it's much more the patient is central to this. The other big thing that's really been a huge benefit of the pandemic is now the world understands how medicine's developed.
Yes.
Which makes us a little more elevated than the used car salesman. The perception of what this industry does. I mean, I'm thrilled that we were able to do vaccine development as rapidly as we were.
Yep. And as transparently and as publicly. I mean, some people would say they want more transparency as we move forward with variants, but that's a conversation for a different day.
Right.
But really, I think it's been in the limelight. Laurie, this has been magnificent. Thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Anytime.
We should let you get to your meetings and then to the stage, and we are going to get in our cars and come be there in time to see you live.
Good.
But again, Laurie Halleran, CEO of Halleran Consulting, mentor to so many, and somebody who has really changed the field. And the number of you guys should look her up, the number of companies who have got to market successfully, faster, and in a high quality way because of her group. Just grateful for what you've done.
Thank you. Anytime. Happy to come back.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Laurie.
So Jennifer and I will be back tomorrow morning. We're doing this at 8:30 to 9:30 live from there with some feedback, probably, it looks like. But is that right, Jennifer? Do I have that right?
It is earlier.
It is earlier.
It
Okay.
is earlier.
Don't necessarily listen to my timings, but look for our posts on social media about what time we are going on tomorrow
I think
morning.
it's 7:30 or 7:45. I have to just
All
double
right.
check that.
So earlier tomorrow morning, with some more great guests from this conference. Please look them up. It is Convergence Forum. Convergence
It's
again, like Scott Kirstner.
7:45.
7:45. Like
So-
Scott Kirstner was saying, what an opportunity to bring people together. They started doing this in 2003, recognizing that life science, biotech, medtech, digital health were not separate, that they were going to need to overlap in order for us to really advance healthcare. Saw this coming so much earlier than when it actually has started to happen, but honored to be part of that. So we should let our audience go too. We should get there so we're on time. But this was just such a wonderful morning. Jennifer, thank you for all the work that you do. I think, one thing that maybe our audience doesn't realize is how much coordination and work and meeting with people and talking to them goes into bringing these excellent guests onto this stage. And so thank you, Dagmar. But Dr. Joe is really kind of a mastermind of networking, bringing people together. And I'm honored
I
to
thought
work
you were
with
going to talk about my multitasking tech skills.
Oh, your multitasking. I mean, those are beyond compare. I love the multitasking tech skills.
And then
All right,
sometimes I follow the conversation. Okay. Thank you to our audience. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 7:45. Have your morning coffee with us.